Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this free clip of aggressive progressives on the Young Turks. This is just a preview of what you will receive with TYT membership. That means exclusive interviews, panel discussions, and more of Jimmy, and of course, me. Check out this next clip, and if you like what you see, you can access full episodes of Aggressive Progressives by becoming a member. Head to tyt.com/join now.
All right, so we're going to talk to Adam, what did I say? Aaron Matei. And he's a writer for The Nation, formerly of The Real News, and he's been doing stellar work on the Russiagate. He's been asking people for evidence. And of course, as a journalist, if you ask for evidence, that'll make you a pariah. So he's here with us now. Please welcome Aaron Matei. Hey, Aaron, how are you?
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
Good to see you. So
Likewise.
Now last week we had the Flynn memo on the Mueller investigation. So tell us, well, so there was Cohen, Manafort, and Flynn that Mueller gave sentencing recommendations to, correct? And so take us through what happened last week.
Okay, so Cohen gave sentencing recommendations for Flynn. Sorry, Mueller gave sentencing recommendations for Flynn and Cohen, and he detailed in the case of Manafort, Manafort's alleged crimes and lies since Manafort reached a plea deal with Mueller back in September. So I think the case that got the biggest news, surprisingly, was Cohen's. Because the big headline, and this was like the front page of the Washington Post for a bit on Friday, was that a Russian offered, quote, political synergy between the Trump campaign and Russia as early as 2015. And the quote, political synergy was the big takeaway here. Now, you actually go into detail, and what that is a story that BuzzFeed News told us months ago. So Mueller wasn't breaking any news here, and the story is that a Olympic weightlifter from Russia reached out to Cohen and Ivanka Trump in 2015 and said that he could arrange a meeting possibly between Trump and Putin. And as BuzzFeed reported, and as Mueller also acknowledges, nothing came of it because Cohen didn't even follow up on the invitation. And this person was a Russian athlete. So that was the big news from the Cohen filing.
So let me just, so literally a wrestler in Russia reached out to Cohen, right? Makes an offer to Cohen of synergy, right?
Synergy, yes, synergy.
And Cohen doesn't even follow up on it.
They exchanged some emails, but ultimately, as Mueller acknowledges, Cohen did not follow up on the invitation because, and this was for the purposes, because Cohen and his associate inside the Trump organization, this guy Felix Sater, they're trying to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. This is their big project, and their internal emails show that they really were really excited about this, and Cohen especially really wanted to impress his boss Donald Trump, but there comes a certain point where Cohen and Sater are emailing about it, and Cohen's getting frustrated because Sater is promising all of these high-level contacts, but he's not delivering. And in fact, the reason why Cohen didn't follow up with the weightlifter is because Sater had told him that he was going to get it all. He was going to make it all happen, and so Cohen was just trusting in Sater. So then Sater didn't come through. So then Cohen took matters into his own hands. He sends an email to a general inbox, a general email address for the Russian, for the Kremlin spokesperson's office. Doesn't get a response back by email, but he does get a phone call from the assistant to the Kremlin spokesperson, who tells them, "Sorry, we can't help you, but if you want to come, we have this annual forum in St. Petersburg in June. If you guys want to come, you're welcome to come and see what you can do there." And so that is, as far as we know, the only quote unquote assistance that the Trump campaign got on this Trump Tower project. Literally, the assistance was a phone call with an assistant.
So, but I saw a lot of people tweeting about this. This was a smoking gun. They got him, I thought.
Well, exactly. And the takeaway from that is that it's deemed, if there is someone in the Trump orbit that has a contact or a conversation with a Russian national, or about maybe setting up a conversation between Trump and someone like Vladimir Putin, then that is deemed to be a smoking gun. Even if these contacts are not followed up on, and even if they concern deals that literally go absolutely nowhere. The farthest that the Trump organization got in this effort to build a Trump Tower in Moscow was signing a letter of intent with, as Cohen says in an email to Felix Sater, a second tier development bank there. And no Russian government approval, no Russian government financing. But this, Jimmy, this is one of the biggest pieces of quote unquote evidence to date in this whole scandal.
This is the biggest. So this contact with this wrestler inside, this is the biggest piece of evidence that confirms collusion of the Trump campaign and Russia. This is what people are pointing to.
A collusion proponent would say no. There are other pieces of evidence, but just going over what has made headlines in the last week. Yes.
Yeah.
This email from the wrestler. Yes. Political synergy has been one of the biggest things. So that's the Cohen memo. Then we have Flynn. There are some redactions in Flynn's memo, but Mueller gives nothing in there at all on collusion. And of course, all of Flynn's the timeline for Flynn is in Mueller's purview is entirely after the election. There's nothing in there.
So this is the point I think a lot of people miss, Aaron, is that, in fact, I know they do from the comments I read under the YouTube videos, is that people are conflating a lot of things happening in this Russiagate with things that have nothing to do with it. Like, for instance, they'll say, Flynn got caught lying to the FBI about talking to a Russian ambassador after the election. And somehow in people's minds, that means that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia before the election. No, yes. They have not. In fact, what Flynn was actually doing in that situation was acting on the behalf of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. He was trying to get Russia to vote in Israel's favor in the UN, and he was trying to use Flynn to talk to Russia to do that. Turns out Russia said, no, we're not gonna do it. So the real collusion in that situation was really between Israel and Flynn and the United States. It wasn't between Russia and Flynn and the United States. The real collusion was between Israel. And that's another thing that people have no idea about, correct?
No, because we're not allowed to talk about it, because talking about it would lead us to be critical, or at least think critically about our ties to Israel and the role that Israel plays in US politics, and how both parties and the pundits who identify with them pretty much don't criticize Israel, or if they do it in sort of a reserved and calculated way. Now, in Flynn's case, after this attempt to subvert the outgoing Obama administration on Israel's behalf at the UN, there was another Flynn contact with the Russian ambassador Kislyak about sanctions. But all Flynn said to Kislyak was, listen, so basically Obama had just imposed a whole new round of sanctions on Russia in response to Russia's alleged meddling in the 2016 election, which had just happened. So Flynn said to Kislyak, look, we ask that you don't, however you respond, don't escalate the situation. And there's talk that might violate the Logan Act, which bars private individuals from interfering in the foreign affairs of the government. But this is that act has never been charged in I think over 100 years, because it just this is what incoming administrations do. They do conduct diplomacy on their way in. So that was the extent of Flynn's on a Russia specific matter between Trump and Russia after the election. That's what Flynn did. He asked the Russian ambassador not to escalate the situation. And the reason we know there's nothing else is because all those calls were wiretapped.
That's right.
The reason Flynn got outed is because all those calls were wiretapped. And has anything incriminating emerged from that? No. And does Mueller allege anything that's incriminating or that speaks to a quid pro quo? There's a very popular theory that Flynn contacted Kislyak as part of this grand bargain to arrange a deal in Syria that would pay off Russia for its help in the elections. There's nothing on that. And I think we can safely conclude that after, a year after Flynn was charged, all the speculation he was going to flip on Trump or his case was going to reveal an element of the conspiracy, that it's led to nothing.
It's led to nothing, like nothing. And another thing that people confuse is that Manafort's guilty pleas Now he's been, correct me if I'm wrong on this, he's been charged with things that have nothing to do with the Trump campaign, correct?
Nothing to do with the Trump campaign, the election, or even Russia, really.
Right.
I would say he was charged for financial crimes related to his time lobbying in Ukraine in the years before 2016, and then he's been charged with process crimes in the following his indictment on those initial charges. So he's been charged with witness tampering and obstruction of justice. If you look at what Manafort was at, now people will say that actually Manafort's lobbying in Ukraine is related to Russia and possible collusion, because they say that when he was in Ukraine, Manafort was pushing pro-Russian interests. The opposite is the case.
Exact opposite. Yeah, go ahead.
And there's no better proof than Mueller's own documents. In a recent indictment, in one of those recent indictments of Manafort, there's been a lot of documents in that case. Mueller reproduces a whole bunch of internal communications from Manafort's lobbying activities in Ukraine, showing exactly what he was doing. And he's repeatedly trying to push his client, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, in the direction of the West and away from Russia, because Yanukovych was sort of caught between Russia, between the European Union and the West, in terms of he was forming a economic arrangement. He was caught between the European Union and the West and Russia. And Manafort repeatedly is pushing him towards the West, away from Russia. But we don't talk about that because that contradicts a convenient narrative. So Manafort was indicted for lobbying activities in which he was lobbying his client away from Russia. And
what did he do? What did he do illegal in that case? He didn't register correctly, correct? Right?
Well, he definitely did a lot of illegal stuff. He didn't register correctly, and he hid his his finances to avoid paying taxes. It's a tax case. It's basically a tax case, and he submitted fraudulent documents in his loans to banks.
And so my question to you, Aaron, not that you should know or have an answer, but my question is, why is Mueller investigating a tax scheme thing, and why isn't this being investigated by the goddamn IRS?
Well, what's interesting is that, what's crazy is that Manafort was already investigated for this in this exact same issue.
Yes, that's another thing. He was already investigated for this.
Yeah, he was wiretapped and they didn't bring charges. Yeah, but Mueller came in. There was, this is where it gets a little bit political. I don't think if Manafort hadn't managed Donald Trump's campaign, this investigation wouldn't have happened, because he was already investigated before. But Mueller started investigating Manafort, and he came across this, and it is true. Look, the evidence is pretty convincing that he did commit illegal activity. So it's not like we can't say that Manafort is innocent. He's a shady guy. But in terms of whether all this is relevant to a collusion investigation, and whether all this helps justify a 2-year obsession and a fixation on this idea that the Trump campaign conspired with Russia to win the election, no, it's not relevant there at all. And when you look at the details of a case like Manafort, they actually undermine that narrative of a conspiracy.
Yeah. So, do you ever, I see people keep coming at you on social media because you just keep asking logical questions, like where's the evidence for this? And then you break down the evidence and you reveal that it's not actually evidence, and people still keep calling. It's weird how, Russiagate, whether people want to believe it or not, is a conspiracy theory. And so the people who are pushing it are conspiracy theorists, right? Like Rachel Maddow and anybody else who pushes that theory is a literal conspiracy theorist, but they don't call themselves that. Which is why they refer to what Trump did not as a conspiracy, which is what he would be charged with as a crime, a conspiracy to commit. They keep saying collusion because they've already made that word toxic, conspiracy, so they can't be seen pushing a conspiracy theory, which is exactly what it is. So they keep using the term collusion, and now when someone like you comes along and debunks their conspiracy theory, they do this unbelievable mental gymnastics, and they try to call you a conspiracy theorist for not buying into their conspiracy. Is that a little bit mind-blowing for you, because it is for me?
The whole media culture around Russiagate has been mind-blowing. Seeing people disregarding the facts, embracing wild theories. I called someone a conspiracy theorist the other day, on Twitter, and I was actually thinking, I try to avoid calling people names. So I was thinking a more accurate way to put it would be a proponent of a theory of conspiracy, because because conspiracy theories sometimes can turn out to be true.
Of course, of course.
Theory,
you know what the biggest conspiracy theory in my lifetime was?
What's that?
Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. That was a conspiracy theory. And then we went to war on it. You know what another conspiracy theory in my lifetime was? That the Iraqi soldiers are taking babies out of incubators and letting them die on the floor. That's why we went into the first Gulf War. That was also a conspiracy theory. You know what another one was? Is that we were attacked in Vietnam. That was also a conspiracy theory. So there's one conspiracy after another that the government pushes so we can get into wars. So that, but what they want to do is make it sound like you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, and anybody who pushes a conspiracy is nuts, even though conspiracies are happening every day and they're being pushed by the government.
Yeah, and the other, on top of being called a conspiracy theorist, I mean, the other one that blows my mind is when people like you and I, Jimmy, are called Trump supporters.
Yes.
Because we doubt this conspiracy theory.
Right.
When, if anything, if you look at what has been the impact of Russiagate and what has been the impact of the liberal left, whatever you want to call it, embracing it. We've taken our eye off of Trump's actual policies. We've become convinced that Robert Mueller is our savior, and he's going to uncover this grand conspiracy. We've weakened our ability to mobilize. I mean, if you look at what has been one of the biggest protests of the liberal left under Donald Trump's presidency, it wasn't over the further gutting of Obamacare, which, whatever you want to say about Obamacare, I mean, Obamacare sucks, but certainly Trump's decimating it has to be opposed. It wasn't over this tax heist, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, upward transfers of wealth in U.S. history. Bigger than protests against that was the recent firing of Jeff Sessions, where tens of thousands of people marched across the country
for Jeff Sessions.
For Jeff Sessions,
a racist.
A racist. And it was under, now of course people will say we don't support Jeff Sessions, but we support his oversight of the Russia investigation. And they were upset that Trump installed this guy Whitaker as a loyalist in his place. But I mean, this is what we're going to mobilize around. It's like in France right now, there's a movement, like for over actual issues, and certainly that movement is not perfect. But the point is, it's an example of people being involved in issues that impact their actual daily lives.
Right.
And right now we're mobilizing to defend the conspiracy theory of a bunch of that has been propagated by failed liberal elites who lost to Donald Trump. And the only way for them to save face was to come up with an excuse for their humiliating loss. And this is what they've embraced. And we're sort of, in buying into this, I think we're doing their work for them when they don't deserve it. And meanwhile, I think it's Trump's agenda that benefits the most, because we're not actually empowering a real resistance, something that actually takes on his policies. Instead, we're in this fantasy world where Robert Mueller is going to save us.
And so while we all who consider ourselves on the left want to oppose Trump, there are certainly better ways to do it and worse ways to do it. And I think one of the worst ways to do it is to focus attention on Russia and pretend that our problems came from another country. You know, we had the biggest election fraud committed in the history of our country in the 2016 election. It was in the Democratic primary, and not a goddamn person is talking about that. And that's the real problem in our country, and they haven't done anything to fix it. And so here we are again, Tim Canova getting cheated in Broward County, the craziness that's happening. We have no integrity in our voting machines, and people don't care. And the oligarchs don't want to fix any of this. Why aren't the Democrats screaming for the reinstitution of the Voting Rights Act? What are they even pushing for? None of that stuff is happening, right? And it just goes to show you that their concern over the integrity of our election is a smokescreen to cover for their nefarious behavior in the 2016. That's exactly what's happening here. That is, and by the way, you watch even on PBS. I was watching Donna Brazile being interviewed on Frontline, and she was saying the interviewer was just saying, well, since Russia hacked our election, they just say it as fact.
Yeah.
It's not even like, well, the unproven accusation that Russia, they just say it, well, since Russia hacked they just say it now. Isn't that amazing? But that's how propaganda works, right? You say it over and over and over again until people just have internalized it. It's
as I've said before to you, Jimmy, it's a privilege reinforcement racket. It's literally a scheme, maybe not a conscious scheme, but it certainly operates like one and it exists like one that was concocted by privileged people in order to distract us from real issues and to deflect responsibility for their own losses, their own failures, the Democrats who lost to Donald Trump. And perpetuating the scheme assures their position, because if all this is Russia's fault, if Russia is attacking us, then they don't have to look in the mirror and examine, well, maybe like our policies weren't so good. Maybe we should have campaigned in Wisconsin and Michigan. Maybe we should rethink this neoliberal economic program that has hollowed out large parts of the countries and that we've come to be associated with, and has been good for us. We get to go see Hamilton on Broadway, but meanwhile, people across the country are suffering. There's none of that. Blaming Russia is a way to reinforce their own privilege, and not only is it a racket in sort of like the scheme sense, but it's a racket noise-wise, because it distracts everybody from real issues.
Yeah, and aren't you surprised to see how? I'm surprised to see all the news outlets that are considered independent or considered on the left that are going right along with it. Now, you didn't do it over at the Real News, and we didn't do it here at Aggressive Progressives, but almost ubiquitously, it has been, pushed by the people who consider themselves to be on the left, and that, to me, is like almost you couldn't be a bigger useful idiot.
That aspect has been really sad. I mean, I could say a lot about that, but in general, I've been shocked at how credulous some of my colleagues, many people who I really respect, really have done great work, have been on this. I mean, the most positive spin I can put on it is that people are really unnerved by Trump's victory. It was traumatizing for some people, which I totally get, but that's led them, I think, to embrace theories that are comforting and that are convenient, but are not grounded in fact. And especially as journalists, it's our responsibility to be grounded in fact.
Wouldn't you, we have to wrap it up, but wouldn't you agree that I've made the point that exactly what happened to the right wing when a black guy with a Muslim name became president? They freaked out and started talking about birth certificates, and he's a socialist, and he's wearing a tan suit, and his feet are up on the desk, and every crazy thing in the world. And that's exactly what's happened to now people who in the Democratic Party and in the left media that Trump is president. They're doing the exact same thing.
I definitely think there's a parallel between the chauvinism and the xenophobia that was a part of the conspiracy mongering that was the anti-Obama birther movement, and the chauvinism and the xenophobia that is now this Russiagate craze. I mean, look at just what happened to Maria Butina, this Russian student who has just been spent months in solitary confinement, treated horribly. She just reached a plea deal in her case. She was smeared in the media as a spy, which is just not true. She's basically pled guilty to failing to register as an agent of the Russian government in a bid to establish ties between Russia and the U.S., which is not espionage. And everybody, including outlets on the left, called her a spy. There was prosecutors made claims that she was that she was offering sex in order to curry favor with Republicans, which the judge in the case noted when she looked at the actual evidence, which were some playful text messages. The judge said it took me 5 minutes to realize that this was a joke. But yet this widespread misogynist view of her was circulated widely. Every outlet basically picked it up. And it exists and it's sustained by Russophobia. And so certainly I do see a parallel there between Russiagate and the birther movement.
Aaron Matei, thanks for taking time. We're out of time. Everybody check out his writing at The Nation. And I appreciate you spending time with us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jimmy.
All right, so we only got a minute or so left. Anything you want to talk about? Because I know you don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about something?
Well, I actually want to ask him about that.
Why'd you let him go?
But you were on a good rhythm. So
you were on a roll.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt. And I'm with him. I think he's terrific. I want to ask him if there were other regular criminal interactions between the Trump folks and Russians, and not necessarily Putin, but oligarchs or whoever else that whether it be the Moscow Trump Tower project or something else, that they're engaged in some sort of just criminal wrongdoing.
Okay.
Because I'm totally unclear on.
Well, I mean, everything that's been so they are doing nefarious stuff. Like Manafort did do some stuff tax wise, and Cohen did do some lying to them. They all did some, but it's not the main. It's like it's the exact same thing. Hey, we caught Clinton lying about a blowjob, so that means he was guilty in the Whitewater deal. No, those have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
So there's the same thing that's happening here. Hey, we got Flynn lying about talking to a. That has nothing to do with collusion. Has nothing to do with. Steph, do you have anything to say? We got to go? Okay, well, listen, February 1st is the next live Jimmy Dore show in Burbank, California. February 1st, go to jimmydorecomedy.com, get your tickets. And are you going to be here next week?
Next week, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
So I'll be back.
So we'll be back. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a member. Bye, everybody.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this free clip of Aggressive Progressives on the Young Turks. This is just a preview of what you will receive with TYT membership. That means exclusive interviews, panel discussions, and more of Jimmy, and of course, me. If you like what you saw, you can access full episodes of Aggressive Progressives by becoming a member. Head to tyt.com/join now.